And you will forgive me, and I've already begged Don's forgiveness if I speak a moment or two here and later on the burden that racism has imposed upon us as a nation. The presiding bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church, of which Mr. Roof was a member, observes that we might say that this was an isolated act by a deeply disturbed man, but we know that that is not the whole truth. And even if he was unstable, the framework upon which he built his vision of race is not. Racism is a fact in American culture. Denial and avoidance of this fact are deadly. I say this to you because the Wall Street Journal, in its infinite wisdom, has declared that systemic racism no longer exists in America. I hate to disagree with such an esteemed body, but I believe they are entirely wrong. And we cannot look at these acts or any like them and the ones that go on continually, often out of the sight of white America, and say that these are just the random bits and flotsam of freedom falling on some unfortunate laps. For this preacher, for this pastor, racism is the original sin of this country. And until we take ownership of that our entire nation is in some way built upon the structure of dispossession and possession of people of color, we will be seeing these events over and over and dismissing them again and again as isolated acts. I don't want to take your Sunday away. But for Susie Jackson, Sharonda Coleman Singleton, DePayne Doctor, Ethel Lance, Daniel Simmons Sr., Clementa Pickney, Cynthia Hurd, Tawanza Sanders, there is no Sunday. And so if I take away from the beauty of this day, it is because 9 who should have lived no longer live. And unless we do more, others will continue to pay for our sin as a nation. I will speak at some moment later about where we should go as a community. But this Sunday deserves its integrity, because the other thing that comes with these events is the terrible thought that even our houses of worship are now targets of opportunity designed to scare us, drive us away. At this point in my life, if someone says, I'm thinking of a reason, I need to know why I should go to church, my question to you is, I need to know why not. What other cause can have greater urgency in your life than to be present in your freedom, in your spirit, in your courage? Here is where we become the people we always said we should be. Having said that, and being glad that Don is still here to deliver words of comfort and pleasure and gratitude on this beautiful summer solstice day, which we will not allow to be robbed from us because someone else would threaten our souls. We will now. It is our custom to read something responsively. You become the liturgist here. These are words you're offering to each other. Take note of the words that I say at the beginning, and remember what I said earlier. Teach your children well.
Keep them on your dreams.
The ones they pick.
The ones you know by.
Don't you ever ask them why.
If they told you, you would cry.
So just look at them and sigh.
Know they love you.
Tender words from a song most of us know. This is Fountain Street Church, a center of liberal religion for over 100 years. We were rowdy Baptists for most of that time. We have been rowdy independents since that time. We have been outsiders at the same time we've been at the center. We have been all those who have been cast out, left out, or walked out of other faith traditions. We are the people that others would rather not have around. And yet we are here. We are here together not only to take comfort in our own company, which is vital. It's hard to be alone. But we are here to be a people so that those around us can never say, thank goodness they're gone. We have a task in life, to be of mutual service to one another as members, to be welcoming neighbors for those who come through our doors and say, yes, you too have a place at Fountain Street Church, and to be a lighthouse, a beacon place, to remind people that our minds are not yet free if we can still harbor a thought of hate toward anyone, that our souls are not yet grown if we can still keep them shut from anyone, that the world is not yet just if any of us can close the door to another soul. These are our tasks. They ever have been and ever shall be. If you're new to us, we want you to join us. If you can't live with us, at least let us bid you farewell with gladness. And we are, and always will be, Fountain Street Church.
There's a place that I know where the sycamores grow and daffodils, they have their fun, where the cares of the day, they seem to slowly fade away in the warmth of the evening sun. Peace when the day is done. And if I go there real late, let your mind meditate on everything to be done. And if you search deep inside and let your conscience be your guide, then the answers are sure to come. No need to worry none. With a new point of view, life's true meaning comes to you, and everything you seek will be won. And if you search deep inside and let your conscience be your guide, then the answers you are looking for will come. 'Cause peace is for everyone. Peace is for everyone. Peace is for everyone. I could reach the stars, pull one down for you. I'd shine it where you are, so you could see it too. That this love I have inside is everything it seems. But for now I find that it's only in my dreams. If I could change the world, I would be the sunlight in your universe. You might think my love was really something good, baby, if I could change the world. If I can reach the sky, pull one down for you, I'd shine it where you are, so you can see it too. That this love I have inside is everything it seems. But for now I find it's only in my dreams. If I could change the world, I would be the sunlight in your universe. You might think my love was really something good, baby, if I could change the world. Oh, if I could change the world. Oh, if I could change this world, I would be the sunlight in your universe. You might think my love was really something good, baby, if I could. Oh, just change the world.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Father's Day. I've been celebrating my father in one way or another for 54 years now, and I've never stopped learning from him. I've also been celebrating being a father for 31 years. All three of my daughters have taught me so much about life. And like my father, they have taught me about strength of character, about responsibility, and about helping others just because it's the right thing to do. Often we view our fathers through a different lens as we grow older. We get a better sense of who they are, their strengths, and their weaknesses. For me, when I was young, my father seemed invincible and bigger than life. He worked 16 hours a day, often 6 days a week, to raise a family, support a family, and at the same time he was building his own house. But during my early years, and until the time I was around 12 years old, I did not know him. Sure, he lived in the same house. We sat at the same dinner table. But there was also a distance that a small child cannot bridge with a parent. And so it often goes from generation to generation. The emotional baggage is passed on from parent to child. For my father, this may have been explained in large part because of where he came from. He was born during the Depression, the third child to a 19-year-old unwed mother. Her occupation was listed on his birth certificate, not the one you get from probate court, but the real birth certificate. She was listed as housework, and the name of his father was listed as unknown. He lived in an orphanage the first year of his life, and he was adopted by a couple in their 40s when he was 14 months old. His name at that point was changed from Carl David to David Carl. As a child, he would sit quietly in a small boat for hours while his parents fished. Perhaps due in part to the Depression, he never had toys to play with. He didn't like discipline, and he did not like school. He eventually made it through the 7th grade, where his education stopped. He used to joke that he liked the 7th grade so much that he did it 3 times. At 15, he was packing a gun and working as a security guard for Railway Express. He then worked as a carpenter until at the age of 17, he changed his birth year from 1931 to 1929 so that he could join the Army. He then served from August of 1948 until June of 1952. Most of that time in Europe with the Army Corps of Engineers. After the service, he hired on at C&O Railroad, and his lifelong love of trains began. He met my mother, and they were married on New Year's Eve, 1953. 4 children, and almost 20 years later, my father unexpectedly began to bridge the gap that had existed between us. He taught me how to play baseball, started going to my Little League games. We went fishing. We didn't sit in a boat for hours. We fished from the pier in Holland or Grand Haven. When I was 12, he decided that we were going to build a cabin together up in the woods behind our house. Together we picked the location, we carted the foundation blocks up the hill, put them in place, and we built an 8x10 cabin, complete with a caboose stove and bunk beds. Our tradition was to sleep in the cabin every Thanksgiving Eve, getting up during the night to put more coal in the stove, getting up in the morning to make breakfast before we would head down to the house to help prepare Thanksgiving dinner with the rest of the family. One year we traveled to Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, where we stayed at a ranch a few miles outside the park. It's a perfect setting, something out of a picture book. Behind the lodge was a creek that our family spent a couple of hours hiking along. And my dad got this idea. Said, we're coming back, and we're hiking up this canyon. We're going to find where the water comes out of the mountain. So we returned to Michigan. He spent 2 years preparing that vacation. The plan was for us to hike to the top of the canyon, spend the night, and hike back and return the next day. But we found out some things just don't go according to plan. The problem was the trail went back and forth across the creek. And as the snow melted, the creek began to rise, and it was very difficult to get across. It got to the point where my dad would tie a rope on one end around a tree, go across, tie the rope around a tree on the other side, come back, and I would be on his back. And with the water rushing, he would get me to the other side. We did that as long as we could until the water was rushing. The water was too high, and we were forced to turn back. We never made it to the top of the canyon, but we do have some pictures immortalizing that event. One of my fondest memories was when my father would take him to work, to tag along and to be able to ride on a train. It's a pretty nice experience for a kid. I get to drink coffee, stay warm by the caboose stove, sit up in the caboose cupola, the dome part that's up on the top, up on the roof, and ride up in the engine compartment. There's always been something about the sound of a train's wheels on the track and air being released from air brakes. But the best thing was the smell of a train's diesel fuel. Some people like it, people probably don't. Years later, and a few months before my dad retired in 1993, I asked him if I could go to work with him one more time. It was a bit awkward. I was 32 years old. I had 2 children of my own at the time, but he understood. At the time, he was a conductor on a work train to Hamilton, Michigan. And as an adult, I got to see my father go with my father to work one more time. One of the most enduring memories was riding with my dad alone in the caboose. As at the end of the day, the train was moving through the countryside. He was up in one side of the cupola, I was on the other side. We had the windows wide open. And in the darkness, I looked over, and my dad was sitting with a look of total contentment. The window open, sounds and smells blowing into his face. And something had changed from the time that I rode the train as a child with him. This time it was about him. It wasn't about the train. And some things, it's a poem that one of my daughters read, some things never do change. The sound of leaves being rustled by breeze, the smell of dirt, sound of a baby, the sound the baby makes when it's sleeping. But as we know, some things do change. My dad passed away 6 years ago on July 4th, 2009. When I was preparing to speak at his funeral several years ago, I spent a lot of time thinking about what was it that made him so special. Not just to me, but to everyone that he touched along the way. What was it about my father that was special? Here's a man who only had a 7th grade education, spent his year working as a freight train conductor. For anyone looking at his life, what was it that really mattered? For any of us, at the end of the day, what is it that really matters? For my father, what I arrived at was actually pretty simple. He had integrity, he had character, and he led by example. Work hard, be honest, and take care of your family. Whether man is a pauper or a king, those are some pretty good principles to live by. Like what the Velveteen Rabbit became, my dad was real. He didn't break easily. and all of his hair had been loved off. Toward the end of his life, his strength made him still seem invincible. And in my eyes, his stature only grew. Throughout his illness, as my father's health deteriorated, he never complained. He never asked anyone to feel sorry for him, and until the end, his main concern was for my mother. At one point, he made a body movement that showed he was clearly in pain. My mother reached over, touched his arm, and asked him if he was hurting. Hardly able to speak, and in an effort to ease her concerns, he said, "I'll be all right." I'm reminded of a poem by the author and poet Charles Bukowski, who in one of his last poems, written shortly before his death in 1993, he lamented, "Oh, I was once young. Oh, I was once so incredibly young." About a year after my father passed, I started thinking about what is it I can do to still celebrate his life? What is it that he really liked? Well, he liked Smelt, he liked Jack Daniels, and he liked Johnny Cash. So on July 8th, 2011, would have been his 80th birthday, we held a celebration for him. We closed down our street in East Grand Rapids. We had a party with over 100 people in attendance, and we had what we called the first Smelt Fest celebration. We cooked and ate 20 pounds of smelt. That's a lot of smelt. A lot of smelt. We had a Jack Daniels toast to my dad, and we had a musician performing Johnny Cash music. Each year the celebration grows larger, and this July we'll be holding our 5th annual Smelt Fest celebration. The thing about honesty and integrity and courage, we seem to know it when we see it. I remember watching To Kill a Mockingbird as a child and being drawn to Atticus Finch, the father's character. He was just a character in a movie, a character in a book. But he seemed to be everything a father should be. In one of the most memorable scenes, he tells his daughter Scout, "I wanted you to see what real courage is, instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun. It's when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through no matter what." That always stuck with me. The idea that it's okay to fight the fights you're likely to lose, but to still fight them anyway, because it's the right thing to do. We all know how George McGovern's campaign for president ended in 1972. He lost against Richard Nixon by a very substantial margin. He won 17 electoral votes, just Massachusetts and Washington, D.C., to Nixon's 520 electoral votes. Laura Bloomfield wrote in 1995, "His landslide defeat was a personal and political repudiation, an election that seemed at all levels to represent the triumph of cynicism over compassion." But in 1983, Senator McGovern decided to run again for president. And during the time that he sought the Democratic nomination, along with roughly 7 other candidates, during every debate, he would defer to all the other candidates and let them speak first. Once they finished speaking, he would talk about unity and how important it was that they work together to defeat Ronald Reagan. And I should mention that George McGovern actually spoke here at Fountain Street in early 2004 in the sanctuary. When my daughter Alex was 5, she's now 31, she asked me if there was a God. I told her that some people believe there is a God and some people don't. That someday she would have to decide this for herself. She was not satisfied with that answer. For the most part, children live in the moment and they see things in black and white. For them, God exists or God doesn't exist. She became frustrated and she said, "Is there or isn't there?" And I'm sorry to say that I was not able to give her an answer. And just this last Friday, my youngest daughter, Michaela, who's now 15, asked a similar question. Do you believe in God? She doesn't think I do, but then she thought, if he's spending this much time on a sermon, I wonder. Michaela's issues with religion are due largely to what she has seen growing up in West Michigan. It's also due to how religion has been misused by politicians and others who use it as a basis to claim that they and only they know the difference between right and wrong. So I told Michaela, don't look at it as if it's literal. Don't look at religion as if it's literal. Look at it as a metaphor. Maybe it works. God, Genesis, Jesus, dying for your sins, or dying for the sins of others. But the questions she asked are good ones. If you cannot make anything from nothing, then there had to have been a God that created us. But then where did God come from? The age of the universe is 13.82 billion years. The age of the earth, 4.54 billion years. We have been here a relatively short time. Duncan Littlefair once said, "We are but a speck of dust. How can we possibly believe we are the darlings of the universe?" Do I regret never having these conversations with my father? We never really talked much about the meaning of life, about religion, or about philosophy. For him, life was to be lived and not talked about. My dad never liked anyone to tell him what to think, and that was certainly the case with religion. I never once my entire life ever heard him talk about his religious views. And I wonder, how is that even possible? But I actually respected him for it. Even near the end of his life, there was no groveling for personal salvation, no efforts to make a deal with a God he either did or did not believe in. And if there was, he kept it to himself and shared it with no one. So what makes this religion thing work? Maybe Michaela, the 15-year-old, is right. When we die, we're dead. I think that's a little unsettling. In the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, the book's author takes a journey across the country on a motorcycle with his 9-year-old son. In the book's epilogue, the author relates a story about how his son, years later, died after being stabbed during a robbery attempt in San Francisco. And he asks these questions. Where did he go? He had bought an airplane ticket that morning. He had a bank account, drawers full of clothes, and shelves full of books. He was a real live person, occupying time and space on this planet, and now suddenly, where was he gone to? Did he go up the stack at the crematorium? Was he in the little box of bones they handed back? Was he strumming a harp of gold on some overhead cloud? None of these things made any sense. What was it I was so attached to? Before I could ask, where did he go, it must be asked, what is the he that is gone? He goes on to talk about the pattern of a person that is left behind. That part of the pattern that is not the flesh and bones can be referred to as the spirit. And there certainly does seem to be something left behind. But that someone is remembered, that's what matters. I can't imagine anything worse than to die and to have no one care, to die and to have no one grieve. Triggered by a smell or something we see, memories can come from nowhere and blindside us. I smell fresh dirt and I see my father digging tirelessly in the yard. I smell a type of fall weed, and it takes me back to my parents' yard where my dad and I were playing horseshoes before my return to college for fall semester. Sometimes those memories provide incredible comfort, and sometimes they make our insides hurt. I want to leave you with one other lesson from my father that I'm still trying to learn. Relax. Enjoy every moment of your life experiences. And don't be in such a hurry. Van Morrison once said that early morning is when contemplation is best. The next time you step out into the morning air, stop. Close your eyes and just breathe. Smell the morning air. All of it. And the next time you have to stop for a train, enjoy that too, all of it. The closer you are to the tracks, without being in danger, the better. Put down your windows and shut your engine off. Don't just watch the train pass. Listen to it and smell it. In the movie Hook, Maura Banning, the character who plays Robin Williams' wife, tells him, "Your children love you. They want to play with you. How long do you think that lasts? Soon your son may not even want you to go to his games. We have a few special years with our children when they're the ones that want us around. After that, you're going to be running after them for a bit of attention. It's so fast, a few years, and it's over. And you are not being careful, and you are missing it." I have 3 daughters, ages 31, 29, and 15. They were each just infants. We blink and our children have grown up. We blink and we have lost track of where the time has gone. So relax, enjoy, and treasure the time you have. Amen.